to follow along on your laptops, you don't need to get them out just yet. Don't worry. We've just got a little bit of an introduction and some theory to get through first. I will let you know when you need your laptops. So first, a little bit about me. I'm your host for today. I'm Natasha. I'm an intermediate software engineer here at Entelect, and I'm part of the game engine squad. So we're the ones who build the actual game that you interact with. I'm also a bit of a hobbyist game developer in my free time. You can see my itch.io and GitHub profiles. I have a grand total of 1 game published. I promise I do it. I just don't have much time. So this will just be a very basic introduction to getting your first bot sort of set up and connected to the engine. We're not going to have in-depth AI. It's not going to do anything fancy. It's just a platform for you to get started with to start implementing your own bot. Because I know a lot of people are not from the industry but want to still get started, and concepts like Signal R and .NET and stuff might still be a bit new. You can feel free to code along as I'm doing it, or you can just watch. Between each section, there will be time for you to catch up and ask questions for our helpers. But you can also just stick up your hand and ask questions whenever. I'll acknowledge you. For those in Joburg, you will have a mic on your desk. You can just press the button, and then it will go red, and then you can speak into it. Please make sure to turn it off when you're done, and only do that once you actually have a question, and I've acknowledged you. If I take a while to acknowledge you, I'm probably just finishing my train of thought. I will get to you. Those of you online, send your messages in the chat. I have helpers here who will get your questions over to me. And then other than that, have fun. It's supposed to be a fun day. It's not a lecture. So the agenda for today, we are currently now in the intro presentation. And then after that, we will get started actually setting up our development environments and all our code editors and everything we need. Then after that, we'll get a quick break. You can grab a cup of coffee and go to the bathroom or whatever. Then after that, we're going to jump right into coding. We're going to start actually implementing some of the stuff in the bot. For those who are online and in the office as well, you can connect to the Teams meeting. It is shared, the slides are shared through Teams, so you can go back and forward as you need to within the Teams app. So don't worry if I go too far ahead, you can just go back on your own and go through them. There should be links to the slides on the gist as well. Then we're going to have another short break, go to the bathroom, catch up. Then we're going to finish up the rest of the stuff in the bot. And finally, we're going to have pizza and networking downstairs. Free pizza, free drinks, chat to members of the team, hang out. Cool. So speaking of the team, we're going to go through brief introductions just so you know who's here to help you today. In Joburg today, we obviously have me. And those that are here, I'm going to ask to stick up their hands so that you are aware of what they look like. We have Tobalani, he's over there in the back. We have JP, he's going to be here in front. He'll be the one sending the online questions to me. We have Amantle. I'm not sure where she is. She might be downstairs. Some of them will be downstairs. Usually if you see us wearing these Entelect Challenge shirts, that's us. There are some intellectuals here who are not from the challenge. So just because you see an Entelect logo does not necessarily mean they are a helper. Then we have Gabby. I think she's also still downstairs. Deervolt. Downstairs as well. Everyone's downstairs. Vian over here. Then we have Janique. Where'd she go? Everyone's downstairs. Cool. And then Liani, I think, is also downstairs letting some people in since the guard is not here. Then online, we have Zach and Simeon. They would have been our Cape Town helpers if Cape Town wasn't currently flooded. Sorry about that. Then we have Creolin, Neil, Manal, Laika, and Bianca. Bianca is kind of our leader, I suppose. So you might be wondering how you join this incredible team. So for those of you that are in university, we do actually have a graduate program. So if you are interested in joining and you're in your final year of university, feel free to speak to one of our team members or check out our culture site. The roles we have available are basically user experience engineers, software engineers, and business analysts. You can obviously find out more at our culture website or just chat to any one of us in the office today. So we'll first get started with a little bit of theory, just kind of the basics to get us started. So we'll start with the game rules. I see our GIFs have broken a bit. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, so the first rule is, it's basically based on Land.io. I don't know if anyone's played that. It's a Discord game. And so the first rule is that you can move your bot around, forming a trail, and then when you connect with your territory again, it claims the whole area that you've formed as your own territory. However, if you run into your own trail before actually touching your own territory again, you will prune yourself and you will lose all your territory and respawn. But like Snake. Then you can also encircle the weeds that'll be spawning around the map. When you encircle them, they will be disappeared and basically added to your territory. However, if you run into a weed, it basically acts the same as getting pruned. You will lose all your territory again. There are also opposing bots, though. This is a 4-player game, and other bots can go into your territory to claim it for themselves. And you can also prune another bot by running into their tail. So if you run into their trail, you get all of their territory, and except for their spawn area, and they respawn again with nothing. So the technologies we're going to be using for the bot today, we are basically using C# and .NET. You obviously can use basically any language you want, and we do have a whole lot of starter bots set up on our game engine repo. And we use Signal R to actually communicate between your bot and the engine. And then we use Git for hosting and version controlling our software. That is mostly only a requirement if you actually submit your bot, because it needs to be able to build with GitHub Actions. So Signal R is something I wasn't familiar with until I joined the game engine. So I imagine there's probably a few of you who aren't very familiar with it. It's basically an asynchronous event-driven messaging protocol, which means that it opens up a connection and messages can be sent backwards and forwards at any point in time. So in our case, the client, which will be your bot, connects to the hub, which is the game engine, or the runner hub, if you look at the code. And then the message is a name and optionally a payload. For example, the engine will send receive bot state to your bot, along with a bot state payload that says what the state of the game is. So if you want to get started with your game engine, you will actually need to have the game engine running for your bot to connect to. There is a README file on our game engine repo, so I recommend you check that out. For the most part, you should be able to just run the run scripts and it should be fine. I think you might need Docker installed for that. Otherwise, there are a couple of helpful forum posts on our community, written by our community on getting started. And other than that, feel free to send a message on the forum asking for help if you get stuck. Either one of the challenges or someone in the community will always be willing to help out. Cool. So now we're going to start actually setting up our environment. This is the point where you need your laptops if you want to follow along. And so, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, you can change the slides if you're on Teams backwards and forwards if you need to. If you do join Teams in the office, I please ask you to just mute your laptop sound. Otherwise, there's going to be an echo. So to get started, we're basically just going to clone the GitHub repository. And in the repository, you'll see that there's a branch for each step. So they'll be prefixed with 2024 / and then step 1, step 2, etc. If you don't have Git or you are not very experienced with Git or you need help, in the break, feel free to ask. We'll help you with that. But there was some information sent out in the email to you. You will also be able to see last year's Build-A-Bot steps in the Git repo. They will all be prefixed with 2023. Then you'll also be able to find the recording for last year's Build-A-Bot on the forum. There's a link provided as well. And the repo it's a guide, so try and avoid just copying and pasting. Try and just take more inspiration from it than anything. However, if you don't have Git, that's not a train smash. You can just download the zip of the completed bot with that link there. You won't have access to the branches though, like the step 1, step 2, etc. And then you can just extract it to wherever you want. The prerequisites in terms of software that we're going to need, obviously other than Git, is Visual Studio Code. Last year we used Visual Studio, but Visual Studio for Mac has been or will be discontinued very soon. And I do see a few people with Macs here. And also Visual Studio Code is just ubiquitous across every platform and it looks the same no matter what operating system you're using. Then we will also need the .NET SDK, at least version 8.0.200. The reason for this is a couple of the plugins we use need at least that version. But if you download it off the website, I think it's at version 8.0.306 or something like that at the moment, so you should be fine. Then the extensions we're going to use for VS Code are the C# Dev Kit and the .NET Extension Pack. Both of these are official Microsoft extensions, so don't worry about security, and you should be able to find them fairly easily. So in order to actually create our project, we can basically, once we've got VS Code open, we can go File and Open Folder, and then you can create a folder wherever you want to store our project, and then open that. On newer versions of VS Code, you'll probably be prompted to trust authors, but since you'll be the author, you obviously want to go and trust that. Some of the extensions do require that in order to run. Then actually creating the project, you're going to hit Control-Shift-P to bring up the command menu. If you're on Mac, it's Command-Shift-P. And then you're going to search .NET New Project. Then we're going to select the console app template. We're not going to have a GUI or anything fancy. And then enter the name of the project. In our case, I called it Build-A-Bot. Then you want to select default directory. That's just going to create a default directory for you in the thing. And then you're going to select Create Project. Then if you open your Explorer tab on the left, you should see the file structure that looks similar to this. And also probably hidden at the bottom, you'll see a little accordion menu for the Solution Explorer. That's basically if you've used something like Visual Studio or Rider, it's kind of similar to that. Cool. So now is a chance for a break for you to catch up and ask questions and grab some coffee if you need. Our helpers will be walking around. Feel free to flag them or ask for help. Yes. Cool. OK. So now that we've got our development environment set up, hopefully, we can jump into the code or just listen along if you don't feel like doing that. So first, I'll explain a little bit about kind of the structure of the actual coding sections. I'm going to present each sort of step, which basically corresponds to those branches you would have seen on Git. And then I'm going to explain kind of what I did and how it works. And again, just listen or code along, although you might need to be a little bit quick for that. So there'll be some time afterwards again to catch up and ask for questions. Then, yeah, after that, then we'll proceed on to the next step after the break. So we're going to get started with adding some packages in order to help us actually. Oh, my goodness. Sorry. Sorry, it seems my slides are not in sync. No, that's. Cool. Okay. How many engineers does it take to figure out a PowerPoint presentation? Cool. So let's see. Okay. It's not. Sorry, please bear with us. Okay, cool. Seems like it's working now. So anyway, we're going to add some packages to basically just help us read the configuration and actually connect to the bot. So in order to do that, in your little solution explorer at the bottom, you want to right-click on the project, select Add NuGet Package, and then you'll be prompted with a little search box where you can search for the package. So first of all, we're going to search configuration, and we're going to do the configuration, the Microsoft.extensions.configuration, as well as the Microsoft.extensions.configuration.json package. This will allow us to read our configuration from a JSON file and basically set up variables and stuff from there. Then we're basically just going to select the latest version for every package that we install. So since we're using .NET 8, it should start with 8, usually 8.0.0. Then the other package we're going to add is the Signal R client. This will be responsible for actually connecting to the engine. Yes.
Did you please mention that you're supposed to get
That it should be included with the with the C# dev kit. Yes. I think .NET does come with NuGet now. Yeah. Cool. Then what we are going to do is we're going to create a file to actually store our settings. So we'll right-click on the project again and say Add New File. And then for the template, we're going to choose Custom File without template. And then the name we're going to set to appsettings.json. Then in that file, we're going to basically configure the runner IP. For now, we're going to use localhost. And then the runner port is going to be 5000. That's not likely to change. We pretty much always have it at 5000. And then bot nickname, you can enter whatever you want here. Of course, there's an Easter egg for those of you who know. Then in our program.cs file, we're going to start actually reading out that config. So we're going to basically import our Signal R client, our configuration, and logging. The logging and client is going to come in a little bit. We're going to create a new variable for our configuration of type iConfiguration root. Then we're going to create a configuration builder, add the JSON file, appsettings.json, and set optional to false, since we do need this to actually configure our bot. Then we're going to save the builder.build method into our configuration variable. Then we're going to get the runner IP from the environment variable, runner IPv4. The reason for this is that if you submit your bot, it's going to be run in our cloud infrastructure, and it's going to actually have that variable set that's going to point it to the game engine, because it obviously won't be running locally in the cloud. And then if we don't have that though, since we're running it locally now as well, we're going to basically just get the configuration variable. And then we're going to check if it starts with HTTP, because it doesn't always. And if it doesn't, then we're going to just prepend HTTP onto the beginning. Then we're going to get the bot nickname from an environment variable again. This is also potentially configured in the cloud. Otherwise, we're going to default again to the configuration file. Then for the token, we definitely do need to get that from the environment variable, because if you have an incorrect token configured when you are running in the cloud, your bot will not be connected to your Entelect Challenge website account, and it basically you won't get scored for it. So we definitely need to make sure that that's from the environment. Then the port we can just get from the configuration file directly. That's not going to be configured with an environment variable. And then finally, we assemble that all into one URL that we're going to use to connect. Then after that, we're going to, in a new folder in our Build-A-Bot project folder, we're going to create a properties folder and create a launch settings.json file. This is where we're going to actually configure that environment variable. There is a link down there for if you want to generate a new UUID. For now, we just set it to a random UUID. It doesn't matter since we're just running everything locally. You want the structure to basically match what it is there with the environment variables. The Build-A-Bot will obviously change depending on what you've called your project. So for us, it's Build-A-Bot. If you left it at the default console app 1, it'll be console app 1. And yeah, so basically you set that to whatever your project is called. Then we're going to, again, back in our program.cs, we're going to create a new hub connection builder. We're going to give it the URL that we previously assembled. We're going to set the log level to debug. You can set it to info as well if you want. This will just help us debug any connection issues that might be appearing. Then we're going to enable with automatic reconnect. This will make sure that if the connection drops temporarily, it'll just reconnect immediately. And then finally, we're going to build and save that to a connection variable. Then we're going to actually start the connection and wait. And so the start async is obviously asynchronous. So unless you do .wait, it will just run and then immediately quit. Then once we're connected, we're just going to print out to the console that we are connected. And then finally, when we, we need to actually run it. So on the left side where your Explorer tab is, you'll see a little run or debug menu. You're going to click the run and debug button. Then from there, you're going to select C#. I think this requires those VS Code extensions. And then you select the Build-A-Bot launch configuration. This will obviously change depending on what you named your profile. After this, you should be able to just press F5 in order to run it, or you can just click the run button that should appear in that tab. The first time you're doing this, though, you do need to have program.cs open. Otherwise, it'll say something like if you've got a JSON file open, it'll say cannot find debugger for JSON. So you want to make sure you have a actual C# file open when you do this. Then once it's built and executed, we can see after a bunch of debugging stuff, we can see it prints the message connected to runner and then exits. And yeah, so that's how we know it works. And we'll clean up we'll make sure that it actually keeps running afterwards in the next section. For now, we can have some questions as well, if there are any. We have had a few people who want to actually run the visualizer, so we might have one of our members give a quick little talk on how to actually run the visualizer, since that will help you actually see what your bot is doing. I think we can maybe do that now. Cool.
Hi, everyone. So the visualizer is an interesting project. I don't know if anybody's been around for the Entelect Challenge for last year to see the Comic-Con visuals, those cool visuals that we have every year. So what we decided to do this year is we decided to bring that up a little bit up in the timeline and just strip it down and let people connect and be able to see what their bots are doing much earlier in the year. So if you do look at the README, there is instructions for how to use the visualizer and set it up, but that is for Visual Studio. So if you do not have Visual Studio set up, that's okay. I will show you guys how to set it up. I don't want to disrupt what Natasha's got going on. It might be a bit of a mission, but if you would like me to show you, just raise your hand and I'll bring my laptop and I'll show you guys how to get it running. We have these cool things called dummy bots where you can basically just input commands and you can see how the visualizer and the bot connect and play together. I think it's quite cool. But let me know and I'll show you guys. This is specifically for how to get your bot set up, not necessarily for the visualizer. But if there's enough people excited for the visualizer, we can include that next year. Thank you.
Just as an aside, if you have an M1 MacBook or any one of these fancy new ARM Windows PCs, the thing we use for the visualizer called Monogame doesn't work on ARM-based processors. There are weird hacky workarounds to get it to work, but that's not something that we'll necessarily be able to help with. So if you could please get back to your seats now. Cool. Okay, so as a brief recap, we've basically got a project created. We've added some packages to it. We've added a configuration file. One thing a lot of people ran into is that the app-settings.json file wasn't found. That is because it doesn't automatically copy it to your output directory. So you can just manually copy it to bin debug net 8.0. You should find that folder there. There'll be a lot of DLL files and probably an exe if you're on Windows. So you can just paste your app settings in there. Visual Studio has an option to automatically do this, and you can manually set it to do this. But since we're using VS Code, it's a bit more in-depth. So now that we've got the engine running with Docker or Visual Studio, if you went that route, and connected our bot to our runner, we can get started with actually registering the bot and then sending some commands. Cool. So we're going to start off by creating some new classes in our bot. We're going to basically create a bot state DTO. DTO stands for data transfer object, if you aren't aware. Basically just refers to a class that's used for sending data between two different services. The different fields all are related to your actual bot in the game. I will go over some of the more important ones in the next section. The get and set you do need to put there, as that's needed for the way SignalR serializes and deserializes the actual models and how it actually communicates. Cool. Then, so you would have noticed in the previous slide, there's those location and power-up location fields. So we're going to actually create classes for those. This will be in the same file as your bot state DTO. And these are basically just, the location is just an X and a Y position. And then power-up location links a location to a specific power-up type. You can go over the game rules file in the Sproutopia repository, and it should give you all the details of what the different types of power-ups are and what they do. Then we're going to create a new enum. I put it in the enums package in a separate folder. And then this basically this is the different commands that your bot can actually send to the engine. So it's got the idle command. You can't actually manually send that. That's just what your bot starts in when it respawns. And then you've just got up, down, left, and right. When you send a command, your bot will keep going in that direction until you send a different direction, or until you hit a wall. Then in the models folder and the models namespace, I created a bot command. This basically just sends your bot ID that you receive from the engine. So when you actually register your bot, the engine sends back an ID. Then you send that ID along with an action to the engine, so it knows, okay, this bot wants to do this thing. You don't try and game it. I'm pretty sure you won't be able to. You can't send any random bot ID. Then in our bot state DTO, I also just created a toString function. This is not necessary. It's just a little helper just so we can print it out to the console and see a bit of information. I basically just printed the current tick, the current elapsed time, and then our position, and then direction state, which is just in which direction we're currently moving. Then at the top of program.cs, I added a bot ID variable of GUID type. This is the bot ID that we're going to be receiving from the engine. And then we're going to add a listener for the registered event. And we need to make sure to specify the GUID type in that little angle brackets. And then once we receive that, we're basically going to set our bot ID, and we're going to print something about being connected and registered, and we're going to print out the ID. This is just to help us verify that everything's working. Then once that's done, we're going to set up a listener for the receive bot state event. Every game tick of the game engine, it's going to send out an event to every bot with the receive bot state name, and it's going to send the bot state, which is that model we created. So basically every tick, it's going to be telling you currently what's happening around your bot. Then in that handler, we're going to just print out the state using that toString method I created, just so we can see what's going on. And then we're going to create a new bot command and just going to move to the right. Then we're going to invoke the send player command method. This is basically our response to the bot. We just send it off, and then our bot is going to move to the right. Then, so after all of the handlers, we're going to invoke the register method and give it our token, which we got from our environment, and our bot nickname. So then this is basically just going to tell the game engine, hey, I'm connected, I'm a bot, this is my nickname, this is my token, and then the game engine knows about your bot. When you actually run the game engine for local testing, you'll find an app settings.production.json file. You'll want to just change the number of players or number of bots field to 1. Otherwise, it's going to expect 4 bots to be connected. Then what we're going to do after that is we're basically just going to loop and sleep for 300 milliseconds while our bot is connected or reconnecting. Otherwise, if we don't do this, it's just going to immediately exit and disconnect. Cool. So then once we've done that, we can see we actually start getting some movement. We can see the X position there on the second line starts increasing. First it's 12, then 13, then 14. So we can see our bot is actually moving to the right. And the first thing we can see, it starts out as idle, and then as we move to the right, our direction state changes to right. Cool. So we can have another quick break and catch up. I know it wasn't a lot we covered, but I think some people are still getting stuff set up. So wait, what the hell? Sorry, my thing went ahead of myself. Cool. Cool. OK. We've got one more section to cover, so I think we can get started with that now. We do need to actually leave by 3, so in the interest of time, we'll get going. So now that we've got our bot actually connected and sending some commands and moving, hopefully, we will start with actually refactoring our code a little bit to just be a bit cleaner. So for starters, I'll just kind of explain a little bit about the actual state object and what all the fields mean. So we've obviously got the X and the Y, which are our coordinates, our position on the game map. Then we've got elapsed time and game tick. That's basically how long the game has been running. Elapsed time, I'm pretty sure, is a string that contains like a time, basically, that is how long in actual seconds and the game tick is how many ticks has been executed. By default, we execute 1 tick every 150 milliseconds, I think. That is configurable in the actual engine's app settings file. Then we've got direction state, which I did mention earlier, but that's the direction your bot is currently moving in. So if you don't send any commands, your direction state will be the direction that it's going to move in until you send a different direction. Then the hero window is basically kind of what your bot sees around it. I'll go into more detail on that in a second. And then the leaderboard is basically each bot's score. So your bot and all the others and kind of where they are, how much of the actual world that they've claimed. So the hero window is kind of like your bot's eyes. It's basically a 2D or jagged array, so an array of arrays that basically each element in the array represents a value of a possible tile. So for example, there's a value for unclaimed land or claimed land, one for a player's trail, one for another player. If you look at the actual code for the engine, you'll be able to see, I think it's called object type, and then that will actually show you what all the different values mean. And I think that should also be in the game rules as well. And your bot will be in the center tile, so right in the middle of that array. So we probably want to refactor our code a little bit because I'm assuming you don't want a bot that just goes right. So I will leave the AI implementation up to you, but we'll set up a nice little base that you can build off of. So for now, we'll split our current code into 2 main files, each with its own responsibility, so that being program.cs and botservice.cs. So the program.cs is going to be responsible for kind of reading our configuration, setting up the connection, registering the bot, and then setting up our message listeners and all of that, as well as handling our app lifecycle, so keeping everything running. Then we're going to move most of our actual commands and stuff into the bot service. Here we're going to basically store our bot ID so that only it needs to know about that. And then when you write all your AI fancy code, you're going to basically put it in here or have it call some other function. And then it's also going to take the state from the message listeners and then respond with a command. And it's also going to wrap the bot action and the bot ID into a bot command that it's going to then send back. So to start with, I created a new services folder and put the bot service class in there with a variable and a setter for the bot ID. And then I added a process state function. So when you go and implement your actual bot logic, that's where that's going to be wired up. For now, we're going to basically do the same as before, just send it to the right, essentially. And we're going to give it the bot ID that we have received previously. Then in our program class, we're going to create a new bot service variable just above our above our message listeners. Then when we receive the bot ID, once we're registered, we call the set bot ID function instead of just assigning it to a variable. You can also then remove the existing bot ID variable in program.cs. Then the rest of the code remains mostly the same, except now instead of creating the bot command here, we're going to call the process state function on the bot service and pass our bot state in. And then we're going to send the command that we receive back. Cool. Another short section, but now's your last chance to get some coffee and ask our helpers for any assistance. And then after that, we just have a few wrapping up remarks, and then we will be done. Cool. Set in our finalists. So I hope to see you all submit a bot. So I know some people missed it at the beginning, but just so you are aware, if you are a final year university student studying something like UX design, computer science especially, if you are looking at being a business analyst, we do have a graduate program You can head over to our culture site. There is a link in the GitHub gist thing. Otherwise, we're going to have pizza and networking downstairs. If you have more questions about the grad program, feel free to chat to our team and ask any questions you want there. Cool. Thank you so much for joining, guys. I hope you all had a blast and learned something.